It's 2023, so you already know what it is. I got me a side piece and I got me a main piece. I was talking about, see, I got like sides like macaroni and cheese, right? And then I got main like steak. That's how I like to eat my food. Yeah. And in 2023, you know that side piece. Oh shit! Oh, man down! Man down! Man down! What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is Tier List Thursday. I hope that your day is going phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. I'm hitting you with another tier list just to bring you up. Today, we are going to be making a tier list on the best side deck Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the game. Knowing what side deck cards that are good or bad for January 2023 can be the deciding factor from you scrubbing out at your event to you being a top dog. Of course, if you like content by your favorite and most luxurious hair Yu-Gi-Tuber, then go ahead and destroy that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 150,000 subscribers before, well, as quick as possible. My guy, tell your mother, tell your brother, tell your friend, have your dog watch this video over and over and make sure he's subscribed. I really wanted to let you guys know that every single one of you counts, but let's go ahead and jump into this tier list as I have 5 different categories. Better be caught with it are the side deck cards that you probably should strongly consider playing, all the way down to, oh no, what are you doing, baby? If you're playing these cards, I hope you're playing it at Arby's because you just made 2 bad decisions at once. I'm going to be ranking these cards on not only their playability in the current format, I'm also going to talk about their future playability, and we're actually going to use a bit of statistics from topping regionals over the weekend, as well as YugiohScope.com. Alpha Master of the Beast is an incredible Yu-Gi-Oh card, guys. I personally like this card because you can summon multiple copies, and it's not once per turn. As long as your opponent has more monsters or their attack of their monsters is bigger than yours, you can summon this. It doesn't activate, and it can attack over some of the most problematic threats in Yu-Gi-Oh. My only problem with this card is I think that it's best played in a Beast, Beast Warrior, or Winged Beast deck, and that's where it'll gain its most value, and of course, it is strictly a going second Yu-Gi-Oh card. Anti-Spell Fragrance, we are currently in effect-based monster format. Spell cards are going to take a little bit of the back seat, though there are powerful spell cards that are being used right now, like Twin Twisters, Lightning Storm, and Triple Tactics Talent. If you fall to any of those cards, I would probably consider sideboarding this card, but if you're thinking that this card is just going to be the end-all, be-all against some of the top decks in Yu-Gi-Oh, not really. I would say side this card with caution, and it is a fairly situational card. Book of Eclipse becomes an amazing Yu-Gi-Oh card post Photon Hypernova, where Kashtira becomes a dominant deck. The reason why is because you can flip face down that Shang-Chi tax monster, the Kashtira Shang-Chi, and it is amazing at being able to get your zones back to the side of the field. Even right now, if you can play through that one disruption that your opponent might have, this card is pretty solid. I wouldn't recommend that this be played in every single Yu-Gi-Oh deck, especially seeing that you're going to be giving your opponent's resources if you activate this card on your opponent's turn, but it is a very solid card to be able to address a lot of the boards or force the negation so you can continue playing. Chaos Hunter's a dog, guys. Chaos Hunter is a ridiculously solid Yu-Gi-Oh card. My friend, think about this. It stops the Bestials. That should immediately let you know how powerful this card is. Also, it stops the Ishizu cards from being able to banish the cycle back into the deck. It has so many great matchups against banished reliant decks and is a 2500 attack monstrosity that you can summon to your side of the field. Easily a solid Yu-Gi-Oh card that you should consider siding in your sideboard. Dark Ruler No More is not only good against some of the top decks like Sprite and Flu Under Reese, it's also just a solid card overall. It is extremely good because I guess unless it's against tier limits, man, this card's pretty dope. Like, come on, my guy. Unless you don't like locking out or negating your opponent's entire board, don't play this card. I mean, because in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, it's not about who can beat the board and win in the game. It's about who can establish the better board, and Dark Ruler No More can be a pivoting access to being able to stop your opponent's board so you can establish yours, especially since hand traps aren't being played as much. Probably should be played a little bit more. Different Dimension Ground. This card allows you, or is a slower dimension shifter that can only be used when you're going first. I would say it's in the oh no, what are you doing, baby? And if you guys haven't checked out my opinion on Dimension Shifter, I don't think it is as strong as it could be because of the access of Baguska. Players can just make Baguska and then you're pretty much screwed in almost every given situation. This card is slower than Dimension Shifter and also requires you to go first, which means that you either have to A, already lose the tier limit matchup, or B, be in game 3. So I don't think that is as effective right now, and it's pretty much only genuinely good against tier limit, so I would probably just stay away from this card for right now. Dimensional Barrier. Oh my god, I might get hate mail from this. So on Yu-Gi-Oh! Scope, this card actually does have a 33% win percentage right now, and I actually will be able to explain to you. Using this card against Luanderis is obviously an L because they're not going to special summon from the extra deck. Sprite is another L because they can go into their extra deck and summon links. And against tier limit, Calling Fusion you would think would be amazing, but the deck does play Synchros, Links, and Exceed monsters fairly well. The problem with Dimension Barrier is that the top decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Do not rely on just one summoning mechanic, and on top of that, just like different Dimension Ground, it is a slow trap card that requires you to go first. Dino Wrestler, Paint Boy. This card is ridiculously amazing post Photon Hypernova. I would say situational right now. Now, the reason why it's really good post Photon Hypernova is because this card not only gets itself off the field, but can potentially threaten a destruction of an opponent's card. The problem with Dino Wrestler Pinkertops right now is that not only does Sprite Elf exist in most competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, which prevents you from targeting the monsters that you want to target, threatening battle phase means your opponent can get their full use off of Sprite Elf before you would be able to get rid of it and pretty much get rid of another card. It's almost like a worse evenly match from time to time. At its worst situations and at its best situations, it's a fairly solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. Drolling Lockbird is actually chronically underrated, especially if you're playing a deck that is immune to Dimension Shifter against a Luanderis matchup. When your opponent sides out the shifters, you side in Droll and then you shut down their entire turn. It's extremely good against those search heavy decks like Luanderis and other strategies that are being played inside of the meta, though I would not consider playing this against a smart Sprite player because they will use cards like Sprite Starter in their draw phase or their standby phase, and against tier limit, this deck doesn't seem to search enough to warrant Drolling Lockbird. Evenly Matched is really interesting right now because Evenly Matched has those points in times where it's extremely good, and then Evenly Matched has points in times where it's okay. One thing that I do like about Evenly Matched against a Luanderis player that you can always check is to immediately attempt to go into your battle phase. Every single time a Luanderis player will activate the trap card to summon Miss Valley Apex Avian, and when they aren't on Miss Valley Apex Avian, well, Evenly Matched completely ruins their day. It is such a really powerful card in certain aspects. I think if you can bait your opponent's negations, it's a really good Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. Foolish Goods allows you to retarget one card in your opponent's graveyard and shuffles it into the deck. It is amazing in situations where you want to stop your opponent's chill card effects. It's pretty good against Sprite Elf. It does nothing against Luanderis. Some of the other strategies, they kind of don't care because they don't use their graveyard either. I'm going to put it in situational because it only targets one specific card. I think that that's the biggest drawback for this particular card, as it doesn't necessarily get rid of the threat that you need at all times. Sometimes they have multiple effects that you want to get rid of, and this is just a singular out. I will always say that those time cards like Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood, you need to be playing some form of this card, some form of life point gain or life point reduction from your opponent. Same thing goes with Volcanic Scattershot in Red Resonator. That should be in here too. Those are cards that you better be caught with, just because Yu-Gi-Oh! In games 1 and 2 typically do take close to 40 minutes, meaning that in game 3 you're going to be able to need some life point gain or life point burn card, whatever your choice is. Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, Gaga Cowboy, Volcanic Scattershot, Ghost Sister, whatever it is, you need to have an out to be able to burn or gain life points. Unfortunately, I don't think Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill is that particular card. While this card can negate an opponent's monster effect and could inflict damage, all your opponent has to do is like not get rid of the monster. So it can put you in a really interesting situation where if your opponent doesn't get rid of the monster, you guys go into a draw or they can potentially win. And it also is a card that is completely nerfed by the TCG because it won't be able to negate a monster effect on your turn the way that you would want it to, like if your opponent were to summon Kit Kalos or a Guardian Chimera. So I'm going to put it in fairly situational. If you're using it for the life point burn, you probably want to find another card. If you're using it for its negation effects, it's solid. It's just kind of messed up by the TCG rules. Kirakara Divine Carnate, a card that I told you guys to pick up before it skyrockets in price. Right now is not its time. Right now, I would not play this card inside of the main board or the sideboard, and that's mainly because if your opponent is using effects, you tributing it with Kirakara is probably moot. But when we get into the Photon Hypernova format and opponents start popping off with their effects on your draw phase, your standby phase, and going into your turn, this card can completely wipe that entire board in some summon itself to the side of the field. It is ridiculously powerful, but right now at this second, I don't think that there's enough cards in the game to warrant your opponent activating multiple effects for you to gain this card's advantage. I would 100% play Lava Golem right now because this card is the bee's knees, my guys. They got two spicy monsters on the field. Give them a Golem. There's so many situations where Lava Golem is just insane, and it's mainly because boss monsters on the opening turn normally come in twos, meaning that you can give them the boy to the side of the field and to be able to break their board. It is a fairly solid card where you only have to give up your normal summon, which some decks don't care about. Lightning Storm, I don't think is a really good card. I think that it is I think that it's solid. I want to put it in situational, and that's strictly because Lightning Storm's drawback that you cannot control face-up cards on your side of the field. That can hurt a ton. Like sometimes you just need cards to be able to freely activate, and that's not always what you get with Lightning Storm. Regardless, if you're a deck that can commit monsters to the field and immediately get rid of them, or if you're a back row heavy deck, or maybe a deck that doesn't need a lot of face-up cards on the field, then consider Lightning Storm. But if you're relying on back row removal, I think playing cards like Twin Twisters, which is just extremely good right now, or Harpy's Feather Duster would probably be best suited for you. And if you're dealing with monsters, I would strongly suggest Raigeki, and better than Raigeki, which for some reason isn't on this tier list, but allow me to tell you for the people that actually listen, Dark Hole is also extremely good because not only does it out your opponent's board, it allows you to out those cards that your opponent may give to you. Maybe they're playing Branded Explosion to give you Raw's Disciple, or they're giving you Nightmare Corrupt or Iblis or whatnot. Dark Hole is ridiculously good as it does allow you to crack the code against a lot of boards. It's great against Floowandereeze. It's pretty good against Sprite after you get rid of their main threat. It's just overall a solid Yu-Gi-Oh card. Mistake is a Floodgate Yu-Gi-Oh card. I didn't put a lot of the Floodgates in here because I think we can pretty much sum up Floodgates right now, is that in the sideboard, it's a really weird situation. Mistake is obviously the worst Floodgate that you can play right now. You might as well just play Droll and Lockbird if you're going to play Mistake, right? The reason why Mistake is just so bad is because not only are players prepared for your Floodgates with back row removal cards, the next problem is that you need to be able to go first, and your opponent needs to not be able to maneuver around those cards. So it's kind of a finesse game. If you're playing cards like Rivalry of the Warlords or Goes in Match or whatever Floodgate that you may be it, I would strongly suggest that you play those Floodgates in a deck that doesn't need a lot of spells and trap cards that need to be on the field, and that lowers the chances of your opponent siding on cards like Twin Twisters and Harpy's Feather Duster against you. Now, Mistaken Arrest. This card is Droll and Lockbird, but in spell form. I think if you're dealing with a lot of Floowandereeze in your meta, this card it's ridiculous because it is an amazing going first and going second card. Going second, what you would do is that you start playing your turn like normal. When they summon and attempt to search, you activate Mistaken Arrest. This puts them in a really tough bind because if the Floowandereeze cards can't perform their search, they don't get the additional normal summon, shutting them off from their entire turn and allowing you to play. The drawback, and also a benefit against Floowandereeze, it's a huge benefit because they won't be able to search on their next turn, which is crazy. They pretty much don't play Yu-Gi-Oh, but you need to be playing a deck that doesn't need to search in itself, and that could be a little bit of a problem depending on what you're playing. Necro Valley has fallen, guys. I don't think Necro Valley is as good as another field spell card that we're going to talk about, and the reason why is because Necro Valley is insanely good against Tearlament, but Zombie World is good against Tearlament, and it's also good against Floowandereeze. The reason why is because Tearlament needs to be able to fuse with Aqua attribute monsters, and if you Zombie World them, you're in a way better spot as they won't be able to summon some of their power cards. Not that I would side Zombie World against Tearlament unless like you needed to side some cards that you genuinely don't need, but this card has more matchup flexibility where Necro Valley seems to be only genuinely good against the Tearlament strategy, and on top of that, Zombie World is a bit easier to get into because of Necro Banshee and can be tech protected by the Banshee, which makes Twin Twisters and Harpy's Feather Duster a little moot. Now, Nibiru, guys. My guy, in your sideboard needs to be a copy of Nibiru. Now, it doesn't do anything against Floowandereeze unless they get extremely greedy. Sprite and Tearlament players can play around it really well. But what I've noticed is that a ton, and I mean a ton of the other decks in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, special summon with no consequences, and it's because decks like Tearlament, Sprite, and Floowandereeze pretty much disrespect Nibiru because they can play around. If you sideboard Nibiru, you are going to have some games against players that are not playing those top 3 decks, as they're going to special summon like crazy, don't fear the Nibiru, and then you tell them what the rock is cooking. It is a very, very good Yu-Gi-Oh card. Non-fusion area. Not 100% sure why this is in here because fusion decks exceed summon in Link 2, so this ain't gonna do as much as you would hope. Cyframe Gear Gamma is also another better be caught with its sideboard card. This card is ridiculously phenomenal. Also, a small shout out to Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion. That is also a great sideboard card. But back on to Sideframe Gear Gamma. This card is amazing against the Fluendery strategy, Gammaing their Rabina. It's GG's from there. They won't be able to continue on with their combo unless they have the God Hand. It also can stop Ishizu Shuffler cards that your opponent is trying to use to prevent you from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just overall a great card to have in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game right now. Silent Graveyard, I think, is extremely situational. I want to actually steer you guys away from playing cards that only have a good matchup against one thing. And currently in Yu-Gi-Oh! Silent Graveyard only has a genuinely good matchup against Tier Limit. There are other cards that you could be sideboarding right now that have a fairly good matchup, not only against Tier Limit, but other strategies, such as Super Polymerization. This card is amazing against Sprite. It's really, really, really good against Tier Limit. It's just actually an amazing card, especially if you are playing a deck that already accommodates the Fusion Summon, like if you're playing Tier Limits or maybe an Invoke deck, maybe even Shadows, whatever it may be. If you can accommodate the extra deck space, then Super Polymerization is a god card for helping you break boards, and also is an amazing card that can be used going first and going second. Solemn Judgment, I feel, is solid, and the reason why I feel Solemn Judgment is solid because not only does it stop normal summons, sometimes Sprite needs that normal summon to get their play started, but it also is a great countermeasure for cards like Harpy's Feather Duster, Twin Twisters, Evenly Matched, and Dark Ruler No More, meaning if you are a card or a deck player that plays those cards that auto lose to those cards that I just mentioned, then a Solemn Judgment may be in order for your sideboard. Typically, these are like back row heavy control type Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. Swords of Concealing Light. Swords of Concealing Light, even right now, these are actually fairly solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. They get a boost in the Photon Hypernova set, but I think that these are solid Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that you could consider for being able to force your opponent to use a negation, or you can just flip their monsters face down and play Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is really good for you. Nobody is playing Token Collector right now, my guys. I mean, if people were playing Adventure in Sword Soul like crazy in your local level, or maybe you're a Dino player, I could see it, but I don't think you should be playing Token Collector right now. And lastly is Great Beast of the Sky. Please hear my cry. Transform thyself from, I know too much. But I would easily put Winged Dragon or Raw Sphere mode into this solid. The problem with Winged Dragon or Raw Sphere mode sometimes is that your opponent only has like 2 monsters that you want to get rid of, and this card becomes like a greedy Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. And then there are other times when your opponent has a monster like a Sprite, a Baron, and Rukalos, or maybe a Totally Awesome, a Sprite Red, and a Sprite Elf. And this card is phenomenal. It also can play around the Fluendery's barrier statue, as it does summon to the side of the field, requiring a normal summon, where this card in particular needs to be special summoned, so it can't play around barrier statue. It's really dependent on how you genuinely feel and how you play your deck, but both of these cards are fairly good. And that's all that I have for the side deck tier list for January 2023. I hope you guys are having an amazing day, and if you feel that I put a particular card on the sideboard tier list a little too high, maybe a little too low, or you think I forgot about a card, let me know down below in the comment section, and I'll be sure to try to address it in the next tier list. I hope you're having an amazing day. Destroy that subscribe button and check out another video.